Fellow South Africans, welcome to another exciting episode of The Inside Factor, where we bring you uncensored and unfiltered news. Today I'm joined by a very interesting guest today, Member of Parliament Vuyolwethu Zungula. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you so much.
Now, for South Africans who obangamazi uVuyo, how can you explain yourself to them?
That is a very difficult question. But Vuyo is an ordinary South African who grew up eKasi, went to varsity, struggled to pay fees, dropped out because of imali, went to work, worked in a very, very racist company, tried to find funds, went back to school again, finished qualification yake, and then calling Yamfikela for him to actually serve the country by being part of the ATM.
Now, would you think that working in a racist environment has contributed to you joining politics? Definitely,
because if you look at the system of racism, you can't, it's either people join in other words, they assimilate racism, they try to be pro-white or deputy whites, or they try to change the system. So for me, it was a matter of realizing that it can't be that, for example, you work in an all-white Afrikaans firm and the only thing at all times they speak Afrikaans, even the working papers are in Afrikaans, all meetings are done in Afrikaans, you go to Afrikaans clients, there's no transformation at all.
Now, has that been one of the contributing reasons behind the formation of the African Transformation Movement, if I could say so?
The African Transformation Movement was formed predominantly the African indigenous churches, the churches that are marginalized, undermined in society, decided, you know what, let us form our own voice because we're not represented in parliament. The ruling party comes to us seeking votes, but whenever they're in government, they do not consult us as these African indigenous churches. And you find that the treatment of these churches is something that should be rejected, because you look at, for example, during the time of the lockdown, whenever Amazayoni were going to church, they would be met with, police would come and confiscate their drums and arrest them. But if one of these churches in Sentin were to break the law, similarly, they get to be treated somewhat differently. So it was a matter of the frustration that these churches had with the governance of the day.
Now, as the leader of the African Transformation, we've seen how rules apply differently. We've seen how the police in our country reacts differently to black South Africans and with regards to white South Africans. We've seen how protests, if I could call them protests, where white South Africans went to the beach defying lockdown restrictions. But then when black people do the same thing, they're met with with brutality, if I could say so, from the police. How does that make you feel as a leader in this country?
Look, it's something that shows that we might be 26, 27 years into democracy, but the apartheid police system has not changed. We might have changed from calling them the police force to a police service, but the attitude is there when it comes to undermining poor citizens. Because you may find that, for example, how they arrest high-profile cases is somewhat very different from how they treat a person eKasi. So you find that it's very easy to quickly blame the ordinary policeman who's dealing with the protest. But if you were to look at how they treated Andri Statane in Marikana, all of these other cases, you'd understand that this is more than dealing with the policemen on the ground, but it's a systematic issue. At the same time, we need to place the blame on the police minister, who encourages, in fact, drives these policemen to act in a particular way because he gives them pressure to perform. And when he gives them that pressure to perform, this leads to what we're seeing now.
Now, you mentioned something very important about the system itself. Now, before I focus on that, I want to ask something regarding the ATM with regards to the hashtag Put South Africans First. You know, for someone who's been analyzing this, you know, there are people who have come out to say, but the ATM is a xenophobic movement now. What would you explain yourself? And you often feel that your messaging often gets, if I could say, sabotaged in a way.
Look, xenophobia, there's a definition of xenophobia that applies only to South Africa, and there's the proper definition of xenophobia, which is hatred. Now, when we're saying prioritize South Africans in South Africa, that can never be hatred of anyone. What we're saying as the ATM when it comes to xenophobia, when it comes to trade, there are laws in place to say if you are not a South African citizen, you must invest a certain amount of money, employ a certain amount of citizens, so that there is a benefit of the citizens from any business that could be done by a non-South African. This is something that is done everywhere. For example, if you go to Turkey, you can't open even a small coffee shop in Turkey if you do not partner with a Turkish citizen. In Botswana, there are so many businesses that you can't operate if you are not a citizen of Botswana. Therefore, what we're seeking to achieve here in South Africa as the ATM is to say non-South African citizens, whenever they open businesses, there must be someone who is local that is going to benefit. On a labor perspective, the law is very clear to say only employ non-South African citizens if you can't find locals who can do the work. And this is the norm all over the world. Now, I think we need to accept as South Africans that perhaps other countries have got a high expectation of South Africa. That is why they will quickly try to silence South Africans by saying they are xenophobic, whereas they are advocating for the very same laws or practices that are done not only in the neighboring countries, but each and every part of the world. And it's something that we as South Africans need to understand, that it is a lie to think that South Africa is better than Zimbabwe. South Africa is better than Botswana, because South Africa has got more than 30 million people that are living below the poverty line. It has got more than 18 million people dependent on social grants. Therefore, South Africa, for the ordinary and the poor, it is a hell to live in. But for the rich and the wealthy, South Africa is a paradise. That is why when you listen to those people who are rich and wealthy, they will say you are xenophobic. But if you're to listen to an ordinary man on the street who can't put bread on the table for their families, you'll understand that it is unheard of, and it is a hatred of that citizen to allow the economy to be taken over by people coming from Asia, Eastern Europe, and South Africans basically do not have a government that would prioritize them as South Africans in their own country.
And I want to find out, has the ATM in any way made attempts to reach out to our brothers on the continent to give them this message properly, instead of them seeing and depending on what they've read in newspapers?
Look, for that one, there's people from Zambia, Tanzania, Ghana, Nigeria, because some of them, it's easy to connect via Twitter, who send messages to me to say what you're advocating for, it is true. Because number one, all countries do this. Number two, you've got so many people unemployed and in poverty in your country. Number three, it can never be sustainable to say all people who are poor in their respective countries, let them flock to South Africa. Because our idea of African unity as the ATM is that there must be peace and prosperity in all corners of Africa. It can't be that the idea of African unity means everyone must come to South Africa, whereas South Africa is struggling to cater for its own citizens. There must be peace and prosperity in Sudan, in Ethiopia, in Ghana, in all corners, so that people do not get an unfortunate situation whereby they need to try to swim towards Europe because they can't get a better life in their own countries.
Now, when you mention the issue of put South African first, something that always comes to mind is the issue of borders. What would you say is the state of our national security, if I could say so?
The government has led South Africa into something that could be very dangerous for our country. Currently, there's more than 15 million undocumented people in our country. That is as per the Lawyers for Human Rights. Now, if you've got a country with 60 million people and you've got more than 15 million who are undocumented, that is a ticking time bomb, because you saw what happened in Hillbrow when the police were trying to apprehend one person who they thought committed a crime, and people outside, non-South African citizens, actually came out, threw stones at the police force, and the police had to run had to run away from that situation in their own country. It's the same thing that happens in Sunnyside. Now, it's so easy for non-South African citizens to come to South Africa. Recently, Tanzania released close to 2,000 Ethiopian migrants who were in the country illegally because they were not going to stay in Tanzania. They were actually in transit to South Africa, which clearly shows that there's something that is attractive to all of these other countries. They must bring their citizens to South Africa because in South Africa, immediately you try to enforce the law. So the issue of immigration is politicized, whereas in other countries, the issue of immigration, it is a matter of the law. If the law is saying you can't be in a country illegally, there's no politics. You get to be arrested, you get to be deported. Simple. Zimbabwe does that, Botswana does that, Zambia, all countries do that. Recently, Cameroon recently deported more than 2,000 Nigerians. I think it was yesterday or the day before. Now, if you were to come to South Africa, then it becomes politicized. People term it xenophobia, whereas it is enforcement of the law.
Now, what would you say to South Africans that say we only focus on illegal migrants, if I could say so, or foreigners that are only from Africa, that we don't focus on white Europeans who are in the country to a certain extent?
That is a result of the I could say the previous discussions when it comes to immigration. Now, if you're to read, for example, our documentation as the ATM, it's systematic in the sense that we're saying, regardless of nationality, if you are working and you are doing a job that a South African can do, we need to revoke that permit. That is why when Philip Saunders, the British foreigner who is heading SAA, we said, that person must not be allowed to work because we've got so many South Africans, particularly black South Africans, who can do that work. And when it comes to the issue of trading in South Africa, we're saying, regardless whether you're coming from Pakistan, you're coming from Germany, if you are not, if you have not invested at least 5 million and you are employing at least 60% according to the law, you must not be allowed to be in the country. Therefore, what we need to realize is that there are certain sections of society that will seek to dampen or to deliberately misunderstand this message because, number one, some of the politicians have got business interests in all over Africa. Therefore, their talk to say Africa must unite and all of these things is not driven by principle, but it is driven by their need to secure or safeguard their business interests across Africa. There are white South Africans who are benefiting from the cheap labor that is offered by the migrants. Therefore, because you know that for them, what is important is the bottom line, which is the profit. Therefore, if you are going to avoid paying a South African what they are worth, and you can pay an immigrant almost 50% lower, then those people will actually accept that. Now, that is why they will deliberately misunderstand our message because they are the beneficiaries of the system.
Now, in 2020, you came out and you were in the news. I remember watching you on SABC, if I'm not mistaken. You mentioned how corruption in South Africa is seen as a black thing. Now, could you tell me and walk me through that process of thought?
South Africa is still, in my view, is still a colonial outpost. South Africa is a country whereby we might have said we have achieved freedom in 1994. However, if you look at the treatment of blacks versus whites in our country, you'll understand that it is a pain to be a black person in our country. Look at, for example, how Steinhoff gets to be treated when it comes to the issue of corruption, because that guy is only charged in Germany. South African law enforcement agencies have done nothing with that guy from Steinhoff, whereas other people in our country, if they are black, then they get to be treated with a very, very vicious media. Secondly, get to be treated very viciously by the law enforcement agencies. And another thing that we need to understand when it comes to the issue of corruption is that South Africa has made corruption to be a matter of perception, meaning it's something that is there spoken about in the media. It's not a matter of a person goes to court, get to be charged, a case can get to be heard, and the judgment is made, then a person is regarded as corrupt. If one newspaper article writes a series of articles about you, that how corrupt you are, then the media will paint or create a perception that you are corrupt, even if there's no evidence to support that corruption. So the media is also a tool to advance the subjugation of black people in our country.
Now, would you say, if I could say this, would you say that we're not critical enough as South Africans, that we just take what is being given to us without properly digesting the information and looking for evidence? We just take what is said to us by mainstream media and then we run with it. Would you say that we're not critical enough as black South Africans?
To a certain extent, people in our country are not critical, but at the same time, there's been a systematic destroying of alternative voices in the media. That is why it's always good for our people that Insight Factor is growing and providing the alternate voice, because the media is captured in our country. The media will only focus on one particular narrative. Whilst we might blame citizens for not being critical enough, but other people do not have any options. They only rely on one set of media to actually inform them. They do not have they do not have access, for example, to the internet, where they could watch videos on YouTube, whereby they could compare the type of information they get in order to reach a determination.
No, thank you very much on the wise words from the Insight Factor. Now, you recently mentioned that the Union buildings should be renamed. Now, tell me why.
We have to decolonize South Africa. It can't be South Africa. It's still keeping apartheid names, colonial names. If you were to go to majority of our towns in South Africa, they are still colonial names. Harrismith, Smithfield, Queenstown, all of these names, they are still apartheid names. So the Union buildings, basically the Afrikaners and the English made a pact together to say, let us not fight one another because we're both white. Let us just have a union of South Africa, whereby we as English and the Afrikaners are working together to further subjugate the black people. We as white people, we must not regard one another as enemies. So the formation or the founding of the Union buildings is a result of people who put aside their differences in order to oppress the black majority. Therefore, we can't be in our country having such names for our very important institution whereby the head of the executive is actually located. We need to decolonize all of these names. I know other people will fight when Port Elizabeth is changed to Gqeberha, but they have to be changed. We can't be that we are still, we're apologetic about who we are. I know there's an argument that speaks to say we should be focusing on creating jobs and all of those things. And it's an argument that does not hold water because, firstly, the Department of Arts and Culture is funding all of these things, the name changes. Secondly, there's no price that could be attached to a person's dignity. And this has got nothing to do with only racism or colonial effects. But if, for example, there's a person who grew up thinking Ugoba, their surname is Matlaba, and later on they found out their actual surname is Mazimbuko, they change even if they are 40, because that is how much we as Africans value our identity. So the issue of changing of names, it is something that brings dignity to us as Africans.
Now, you mentioned something which is very important, how white South Africans, whether they were English or whether they were from the Afrikaner side, came together to say we can't fight as white people. Will we see something similar as opposition parties in South Africa to say let's work together to advance the black agenda? Definitely.
It's something that it's a must if parties are genuinely out to improve the conditions of black people. It can't be that people have been misinformed to think that the enemy of ATM is another party, for example, EFF or BLF or any of these parties. That kind of thinking, we must eradicate that kind of thinking. You know, when I got to Parliament in 2019, I observed how the Freedom Front Plus and the DA, whilst they might act as if they are enemies, but they actually work together. Whenever a person from the Freedom Front Plus is on the podium, the people of the DA will cheer and will support that person because that is how they think. Now, it became very, very discouraging and disappointing for me when a person from the IFP is speaking, another member, a young black South African, will heckle and howl, because it means we are not looking at the bigger picture. Therefore, in my view, we need to look at the bigger picture as blacks in South Africa and not fight amongst one another. We might differ in terms of our policies or how we approach things, but I think if the bigger picture is to improve the conditions of our people and get rid of racism and systematic exclusion of black South Africans in our country, working together is a must.
Now, local government elections are coming soon. What are your thoughts on the state of local governments in our country, of local governance in our country?
You know, there's so much wrong in our country. And it starts there at local government, because the people who are appointed there, elected as councillors, mayors, etc., firstly, they might not have the right heart. I'll focus on the heart factor for now, because even if you might not have the skills, you might not have the training, but if your heart is in the right place, your heart is all about improving the conditions of the people, providing service delivery, you'll get there. But if your existence in government is all about you getting tenders, enriching yourself, and you're all about self-enrichment, then we are not going to change the conditions of our people. Therefore, our view as ATM is that the first thing that we need to do right, it is to get the right set of people who have the heart of improving the conditions of our people, who will be passionate about development. Because if you look at the opportunities that are sitting in our country at local government level, if you had people who are just, even if it's 10% driven towards transformation, there's a lot that could be achieved. But if you look at the state of our country, the roads are getting messed up, the services are nowhere to be found, the economies of those regions are basically non-existent, and you ask yourself, what are the people in those councils actually doing?
Now, I don't want to put you on the spot here. Which political party would you be willing to work with regards to local government elections? Because I think we're entering a very interesting space in our political dynamics. So coalitions are going to prove the way forward. So, with my question, which political party, if I'm putting you on the spot, would you be willing to work with?
Yeah, that's a difficult question. I think would work with any party that is willing not to talk transformation, but actually enforce transformation when it comes to legislation. If there's one thing that the apartheid government did well, was to legislate apartheid. Hence, there was a law on Sobuk, where there was a law on you can't be in a particular place as a black person at a particular time. Now, you find that when it comes to transformation, this government has left it to the goodwill of the companies, have left it to the goodwill of the former colonizers or apartheid beneficiaries to actually transform. Whereas it should be legislation, for example, to say any company that is operating in South Africa, there must be a certain percentage of black businesses, black SMMEs that they must procure services from. You know, we must not be begging transformation in our country. It must be a matter of let us make it law and let us encourage and train our law enforcement agencies to enforce the law. That is the only way in which we can win this transformation agenda. It is not going to be about speeches. It is not going to be about hoping that the white people transform, but it has to be about, is it a matter of law? Secondly, is it a matter of the law enforcement agencies, them enforcing the law?
Now, I've been following some time, and one thing I find very interesting, and I must commend you for, is that you always push with regards to wearing South African products. And I can see you're wearing drip sneakers here. How important is you to not only speak that language of saying let's buy black, but also to be seen as someone that does that?
It's very important because firstly, it speaks to the trust deficit that people have with politicians. A politician will come, speak so many, I could say, speak the right things, but when it comes to him actually implementing or showing that they mean what they say with actual actions, they are nowhere to be found. I read yesterday, someone tweeted that on this, I think it was a buy local summit, all of the speakers, they were wearing Italian, German brands there. No one was actually wearing a South African brand. Now, in my view, if we're serious about getting rid of unemployment and poverty, buying local products is a must. There's no way you'd want to get rid of unemployment if we are not serious and we're not acting on buying local products. Because IDRIP now is opening factories, is opening stores across the country because we are buying from them. And if you're to compare with Adidas and all of these international brands, I've never seen an Adidas shop being opened in the last 2 years because they've reached the ceiling when it comes to the market. So all of their profits will get to be reinvested somewhere in other countries whereby they are trying to actually grow their market share. But IDRIP Yona is trying to grow the South African market share. That is why they'll open shops in Limpopo, KZN, across the country, which will translate into employment of the locals. So if we can do that, whereby Ubatu, Vukadaki, and all of these brands, not limited to clothing, but also Mofai, we need to drink that instead of drinking a Red Bull. We need to buy paper produced by the South African lady from KZN instead of this other paper that we are using. So we need to be conscious and deliberate when it comes to the issue of deliberately buying locally produced brands, especially by black people, because they are the ones who have been sidelined from the economy.
Now, the ATM recently came out and said they will stand with the public protector. How important is you as a political party to rally behind that office?
It's very important. The public protector is an institution that has been created to protect the interests of the people of our country. Now, when these attacks on the public protector are made out in the media, the facts are not spoken there by the media practitioners. Firstly, she's the first public protector to achieve a clean audit since 1994. Secondly, you find that she deals 85% of her cases are grassroots cases whereby she deals with ordinary citizens. And there's a few select cases of the high-profile individuals of which she's been attacked for. Now, there's also this issue of the judges, which something has to, we need to look into the objectivity of the judges. It can't be that when Advocate Madonsela instructs a head of state to institute a commission of inquiry, instructs a chief justice to appoint a judge to actually chair that commission of inquiry. The judges are saying that is within the law. However, when Advocate Mkhwebane is saying Parliament must actually change the constitution for the Reserve Bank to be nationalized, you find that people are saying she has overstepped her powers. She can't instruct another organ of our country to actually do that. Similarly, when Advocate Madonsela is saying state institutions must look into the corruption, it's well and good. But when Advocate Mkhwebane is saying the NPA must actually follow those CR17 bank statements because she believes there might be a money laundering there. So those judgments from those two conflicting judgments, and from the very same judge on the very same issue, might give rise to the claims that are there that judges have been bought. Now, if we have a situation whereby judges are playing in the political terrain, it means we're not safe as South Africans, because the courts might be used, in fact, are used to silence or to deal with the political opponents of the ruling class in our country, or the political elite. That is why when judgments on Pravin Gordhan, Cyril Ramaphosa, they will go to, they will be treated differently from judgments or court cases that are dealing with the ordinary person, or the person who is regarded as if they are a danger to our political system. So protecting the public protector, or defending the public protector, it's very critical to make sure that we have one South Africa whereby all people are treated equally before the law. There won't be a law whereby all Ramaphosa are treated with kid gloves, and there's another law whereby other people get to be treated differently. We must strive to have a South Africa whereby all people are treated equally.
Now, as someone who sits in parliament, the issue of expropriation of land keeps popping up. And some people have said, well, I don't think we need parliament to get back our land back. What would you say as a legislator is the best way for South Africans to fight for their land?
It has to be legislation. Our view as the ATM is that speeches, all of these rhetoric must translate into actual legislation. Because if we can't get legislation right, then it means we're just playing. Now, once it's legislated that land expropriation must be there according to the legislation, then we won't fight with other people who are against land expropriation, because it will be now a matter of the law. So what I would like to encourage people is to actually encourage political parties to push for a transformation that is legislated, not a transformation that is based on rhetoric or speeches.
Now, I want to find out something from you. Fees must is an issue that keeps popping up every year. You know, and sitting with you today, you've mentioned how you're going to join the students at the University of Pretoria. How do you think is the best way to deal with this issue once and for all as South Africans?
The first question that needs to be asked is that when VAT was increased from 14% to 15%, what was said by the then Minister of Finance was we need to fund free education. Now, it can't be that years later, there's no free education. In fact, we are regressing. UNISA, there's more than 20,000 students who were said they cannot register. Currently, the government was saying there's not enough money to fund the first years for NEFSAs. Now, what I think is happening is that firstly, the current government is sometimes creating a problem so that when they fix the problem, they appear as heroes. Because I know today the department, the Minister of Higher Education is going to speak with Minister of Finance. So it could be that they were trying to create this situation so that when they fix the problem now, they'll appear as heroes. So of which it speaks to the genuineness, because it can't be that each and every year the issue of fees is a problem in our country. There must be free education. It can't be that there's going to be two types of South Africa, whereby the poor will have to beg for education, or sometimes not even reach matric because of their lack of resources, whereas the rich will not only reach matric, but they'll go to private schools and be exposed to a higher or a better education system than the public schools. Then what the result of that is that you are going to be having these dropouts going for these entry-level jobs or not having work at all. And you're going to have the wealthy, their children will always be they would always be set in life in South Africa because they are better placed because of the education system. Now, our view as the ATM is that money is there in South Africa. It's just a question of priorities. You find that, for example, there's a lot of money that is lost to irregular spending by the government or corruption, but there's no serious talk or serious action in terms of recovering that money in order for it to be used, for example, to fund free education. Now, for us as the ATM, what is important is that free education must be a reality, not 10 years from now, but now in 2021.
Do you think we need a national shutdown?
Definitely, we do need a national shutdown because it's unfortunate that our government, because of how they undermine the majority of poor and black people, without actually shutting down the country peacefully, they won't be able to listen to you. Now, we need to communicate in a language that they understand. We saw it with the taxi drivers when they had a shutdown, the government quickly responded. We saw how, for example, the churches, whenever that they are saying they are going to pray for the problems whereby they are mistreated by the government will never respond because that is not a language that they understand. So the reality is that in South Africa, the shutdowns is a language that will get the government to act.
Now, as we head to the end of our interview, I want to find out from you. The ATM has been accused over the years of being a project of certain factions within the ANC. Now, can you explain that to us?
Those rumors, or in fact, it is the current ANC people who created that rumor because they wanted to create a stigma on the ATM. They went as far as saying, I'm a former DA leader. I've never been a member of the DA. Other publications said I'm a Zuma loyalist or a strong Zuma supporter, whereas I've never been a member of the ANC, which clearly shows that there was an agenda, and the agenda was to stigmatize ATM because ATM is a party which has not recycled leaders from one party to another, political party leaders. As a leader of the party, and majority of the members and leaders of the party, it is our first time being actively involved in a political party, even though we're participating in all of the social issues that were hampering our country. Now, what these people tried to do was to create that stigma. Hence, we find that Independent wrote an expose about how a sitting minister was actually involved in the exchanging of money with other church leaders in order to destabilize ATM. And it's something that South Africans must not look at the ATM and just laugh about it, but they must ask a question to say, what is going to happen in our country if the ANC is actively involved in destroying each and every political party that is formed in our country? It's not something that is only with the ATM. They've tried to destroy other political parties from your Ahang, EFF. They tried the same thing. They are doing the same thing with the PAC. Now, what does that do for our democracy if the ruling party has got a set project or a set objective of destroying each and every political party that will try to serve our people and take political power for the benefit of our people?
Now, my final two questions for you. What is your wish for South Africa and your wish for yourself?
For South Africa, it is basically for South Africans to understand that not voting or not being actively involved in politics can only harm them. For example, we borrowed a lot of money during this time of the lockdown. It is that person who is saying they are not going to vote who's going to pay for that money, regardless whether they like it or not. When tax increases, it does not increase for the people who vote or the people who are actively involved in politics. Tax increases for everyone. When crime is on the increase, it will affect everyone. When unemployment is on the increase, it will affect everyone. Therefore, my wish for South Africa is active citizenry, because when South Africans are active, when it comes to the issues or the affairs of the country, then the government will not be able to get away with the issues that they've been getting away with. Now, I could say for myself, basically, it is for ATM to grow. And because we as a party, I'm sure you've picked up, we've tried to steer away from the politics of personalities, the politics of fighting one another. In Parliament, unfortunately, we only have 3 minutes when we speak there. We try to use that 3 minutes to speak to the issues affecting ordinary citizens, because it does not help for us to go to Parliament. We turn Parliament into a roast session whereby we're just roasting one another's political parties because we're not offering any solutions. So we as the ATM would like to see more people who are keen on fixing South Africa, people who are keen on eradicating all of the problems, actually being active in politics. That is the only way. Otherwise, if Parliament becomes or stays this roast comedy show that we see, we're not going to get anywhere. And I'd like to employ South Africans to say they must not be moved by the roasts that are happening there in Parliament, because we're not going to fix problems if one member of the ANC stands up, uses the entire time allocated to Parliament to just diss or roast another member from another party. But we need to be constructive in our politics. We are in a country whereby we have more than 30 million people unemployed, more than 18 million people dependent on social grants, 58 people get to be murdered every day. Therefore, we do not have the luxury to turn Parliament into a comedy show. However, we need to turn Parliament into a serious platform whereby we discuss and we provide solutions to all of the problems we face in our country.
Vuyo, thank you very much for your time. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, that was yet another exciting episode of The Inside Factor, where we bring you uncensored and unfiltered news. Do catch our interviews every Sunday at 6 p.m. Do follow us on YouTube at Inside Factor, as well as on Facebook at The Inside Factor. Follow me as well as my co-host Utawa Makwakwa on Twitter at Taba Makwakwa, as well as at Mudiba10. Until next time, goodbye.